This is the Made for Living Well podcast, hosted by Alexa Sherm, the place to create a life well lived.
Welcome back to the podcast. As always, my name's Alexa, and this is the place where I believe you were made for living well. I have said that for so many podcast episodes, and I find the need to continue to repeat it because one of the best ways to change our beliefs is to continuously remind ourselves of the new beliefs. And one of those beliefs has to be that health is inside of us. Like, we were made for living well. This should not be as difficult as it is. Now, today on the podcast, we're going to talk about a subject that I have long looked forward to talking about. In fact, a couple months ago, I put out on my newsletter, The Weekly Fill, asking what is some of the worst diet advice you've ever received. And it's just so fascinating to hear back the responses. But today, I really wanted to dive in and talk about bad diet advice because at the end of the day, it's really not going anywhere. Like, there is no future span of eventually we're just going to work ourselves out of the diet era. It's really not going to happen, partially because dieting has profited our world billions of dollars. I mean, so much money gets spent on dieting every single year. And I suppose if enough people kind of opt out of it, then something will change. But of course, as long as we're investing money into it, we're always going to have a dieting space. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to fall prey to it or fall into the traps of it, which a lot of the times is not necessarily intentional. I just want to be clear that I think there is a lot of really great advice out there that's come from the dieting space. However, it rarely works. And I think that this has to be the bigger issue of why isn't it actually working in the everyday average person's life? Like, why is the diet advice not actually paying off? And so in the next two podcasts, we're really going to break down bad diet advice and really reclaiming our place in the health space, shifting our beliefs, and even in the end, forgiving ourselves for the places that we've arrived that we don't necessarily like. And forgiveness really does play into this, but that's going to be found in part 2, including the generational trauma or the generational beliefs that have been passed down to you. But to start today, we just need to talk about dieting advice and really the history of it, what it's done, really the foundation of it that makes it so difficult for 97% of all of us to really never find the benefit from dieting alone. And not to ruin the podcast, but health is really a much larger issue than just what you eat and how much you move, which has historically been the foundation of the dieting space. Now, like I mentioned a few months ago, I asked for responses on some of the worst dieting advice that you've ever received, or maybe even ever attempted. And this is really ironic to me because I feel like growing up in the 80s and 90s, like dieting and diet extremes were really hitting their prime. There was so many wild thoughts and practices that people really engaged with to lose weight and in the end call that health, right? And I watched women I loved. I watched my mom. I watched other women I loved really play into this idea that we could do rash and extreme things and in the end create the results that we were hoping to create. Now, the problem with diet advice is a lot of times that it works. It works in the short term. If it didn't work, people wouldn't do it, right? We're results-driven people. We love the good before and after photos, which really come into the diet history, and we're going to learn about that in a minute, but those are really attractive to us because we don't want to engage with something that does not bring the results that we want. So on some level, dieting has worked, at least in the short term for the majority of the people. And that makes this topic really confusing. Honestly, I think it adds so much confusion that we blame on maybe the diet itself of like, I don't know what's best. I don't know what my body needs. But really the confusion is, why is it working if it's so bad for us? And again, I just want to be clear that it's not necessarily bad to push your body. It's not bad to engage in different things that are going to challenge your body. Your body loves to be challenged. The problems exist is because they don't actually last. And that's what we're going to dive into today. But just to go back to that bad diet advice, I mean, there was so many extremes, right? Like I heard everything from the cabbage soup diet to the grapefruit diet to the liquid fast. Of course, Atkins was big for a time. And even now that's come full circle. We're kind of back in this low carb phase. I mean, there's been so many thoughts and ideas about what it takes to lose weight and get healthy. And a lot of them are really crazy. They're really, really out there. I'm not even sure where all of them came from. I did a little bit of diet history to really understand, okay, when did the whole dieting world start and what was its purpose? As you can imagine, the purpose centuries ago, it was the same as the purpose today. I think at the end of the day, people really want to look differently. And they also want to feel differently. And we've really connected this idea that how you look and how you feel are correlated. And yes, on some level that they are. But we really do tend to neglect how we feel for the sake of how we look. Meaning, we can put so much emphasis onto a number on the scale or into the size sewn into the waistband of our pants that we really neglect at the end of the day, but is it actually making me feel the way that I want to feel? Or do I just think that if I get there or if I arrive, then I'll feel that way? So in a lot of cases, we have really used the diet space to change our physical appearance. But I also think it's a little bit deeper than that. I think we also have used the diet space to create systems and to put order into something that has felt rather chaotic. And when we look at diet history, I think this has been really the heart behind the diet space and not something that I'm necessarily against. Like, I think it's easy to just throw diets under the bus and say that they're bad, but it really has served a purpose. And I think when we really understand it, we can start to understand a little bit more about human behavior and human need. And remember, we can only be healthy to the level and degree that we meet our own actual human needs. And one of those human needs is the need for safety. Now, when it comes to dieting in the diet world, most diets come with a system. They come by presenting order. And that order is actually a really safe thing that we want to cling to because order provides structure in times of chaos. It provides a sense of control in a place where we feel like we don't have a lot of control. And control makes us feel safe, even if it's artificial control. Like even at the end of the day, if we really don't have control over how our body changes, which we don't have as much control as we'd like to believe, we do have a lot of control, but we try to control it all. And we do that through creating systems, sometimes highly irrational systems and plans and processes that we present to people as the answer or solution to the chaos that they feel inside. Structure and order is actually a pretty safe thing, especially when people are feeling rather unsafe. Now, of course, that has to be lived within reason because too much structure and too much order really creates an artificial sense of control, and it can actually make your life more out of control. I'm not going to get into that today, but I just want to clarify that yes, structure and order are necessary within reason. We as humans crave that. We crave that especially in the places where it feels out of control, where life feels chaotic. And if we look at diet history, and it's really interesting to see that correlation of why maybe these diet books came to be was not necessarily just to change how someone looked, but to create order and find structure in the places that felt out of balance. In fact, one of the first diet books ever recorded came out in 1558, and it was called The Art of Living Long. And inside the book, I've never read it, but the summary is the idea that the author was an extremely overweight Italian who had an epiphany that he was tired of being overweight and feeling out of control. And so he decided that he was going to establish this diet to help him regain control over his food intake and his weight. And I think when we look throughout history, so much of our diets and dieting culture has been focused on the weight aspect. But I think that's the surface level aspect of what people are actually craving and needing. The surface level idea is that diet history has been mostly about body image, about how we look, which has really shifted in the cyclical nature, like all things work, from being super thin and worshiping that ultra thinness to plumpness being associated with wealth and power and sensuality. So it's kind of gone full circle. And we've seen that even in the last 50 years, how we've gone from thinness to, I don't even want to say plumpness, but to just being muscular and strong, back to thinness and then muscular and strong, right? Like we just kind of go back and forth. But really, when we get down into the root of it, if we can move beyond just the conversation about body image, which is where so many people get stuck, what is the actual root? And I think the actual root of most diet advice has been birthed out of the need for some sense of control, for trying to create order and what feels chaotic in your internal space. The chaos between your mind, your body, and your soul, or the chaos within your eating patterns. I think why most people cling to diets is the system in order to create order and what feels out of control. And when we really start to understand that, that really becomes the foundation for what we need to work on. Because again, it's not that diet advice is wrong. We will always cling to it on some level if we don't understand what we're really trying to get out of it. Of course, it would all be nice to look a certain way. And arguably, we really do need on some level to create some sense of control within our bodies. Because as statistics prove, we are a very unhealthy nation. In fact, rates of disease, illness, and obesity are on the rise tenfold. And they're on the rise not just in adults, but in our children. Like we have a massive problem. But again, we get so lost and concerned and start arguing about service level issues without really understanding, but at the root, what is it that we're all longing for? And that longing comes from that sense of order. And order brings harmony and peace, really just a sense of wholeness. Like it's a natural order. It's a sense of peace, of I can take a deep breath. I really like to think of it like we talked about last week in the sense of holy confidence. It's the place where you get to stop being so concerned with yourself and you get to get outside of yourself and start living life. And as humans, that is our deepest desire. We can neglect it all we want or miss it, but we often miss it because we're self-protecting. That self-protecting, that inflated sense of ego is not necessarily self-created. Is one of your highest forms of self-protection. So as long as we're living in these safety mechanisms, again, we're going to feel disordered, we're going to feel out of control, and we're going to cling to anything that will give us a sense of control. Even if it's an artificial sense of control, or even if it misses the mark, we're still going to always go back to that because we will always long for safety and find safety regardless of anything else. So I want to say all that because I don't blame you for being in the diet space. I don't blame you for tinkering there and maybe even longing to be there, but yet there's this entire pull away from the dieting space, even this moral tug, and that people make you feel guilty. I've probably done it from time to time unintentionally, and I ask for forgiveness for that, of making you feel like you can't diet, making you feel like you can't find a system that's going to work for you. Really, we all need a level of order. And order is created through a sense of boundaries, maybe even those disciplines that I've talked about in the previous podcasts. We have to create foundations in our life that are going to keep us on the straight and narrow because the natural pull is always away from that. And when we get too far outside our intended design, it is going to feel chaotic. It is going to feel out of balance. It's going to feel dysregulated. And the more dysregulated we become, the more likely we are to jump on a new extreme. Again, looking for order, looking for balance often means we'll pull ourselves to the opposite degree that we're out of balance. Unfortunately, if we start to understand health like a pendulum, when we're out of balance one way and we pull ourselves to the same degree the other way, we're just as dysregulated. It works in the short term because there's a small period of rebalancing that you move through, but the longer you stay there, the more dysregulated you become, just in a new extreme. And this is one of the biggest issues that we have with traditional diet advice. I mean, there's other issues that we're going to talk about in part 2, which is the belief that your body is bad. I think a lot of diet advice is not necessarily harms you for the sake that it makes you miss and misunderstand how amazing your body actually is and how it's the vehicle for healing, not the diet itself. Again, we're going to talk about that in the next podcast because there's a lot of generational beliefs that have been passed down, maybe that aren't actually your own beliefs, but they are beliefs of others that were instilled into you. And we have to unlearn that, which I really think the process of living well takes more unlearning than it does learning. So we're going to talk about that in the next podcast. But the other problem that I think we overlook, regardless of the root of why we like dieting, is really understanding the need for balance within the body. And the lack of balance is why I think people yo-yo diet. Again, when we feel disordered, when we become dysregulated, we will look for a new plan, a new system, a new means of creating order in what feels dysregulated. And so when something stops working, generally speaking, all things on an extreme basis will always stop working. The grapefruit diet can only take you so far, just like the liquid fast, just like low calories, just like low carbs. And the reason is because it pushes the body out of balance for too long that it becomes dysregulated. It enters survival. Anytime the body is out of balance, out of its homeostatic norm, it is always going to pull against you to work to regain that balance. And the body always wins. It might take some time, but it will always win in the form often of downregulation or compensation. These are not great places for your body to be. And what I mean by that, like to give you an example, let's take energy, for example, because energy is one of the most critical forms of thriving and survival of your very existence. And it's also the thing that's going to help you to feel your best self. Now, unfortunately, we tend to abuse our energy levels inside of our body. And we can do this by things like not eating enough calories or overworking out. And just to keep this simple, yes, calories are a metric of energy, of food energy, but that doesn't necessarily always relate into human energy or your physical energy. But what we know happens is when we stop consuming enough energy, when we stop consuming enough food, or we push our body through extreme workouts and we decrease our threshold of energy for prolonged periods of time, your body is going to begin to compensate. And it compensates through the downregulation of your metabolism. Your metabolism, or your signals that send energy throughout your body and your cells, starts to slow to the rate in which it believes you have the energy to survive. So the more you push your energy, the more you exert too much of it or not consume enough to actually generate energy, your body's going to downregulate your metabolism. It's going to slow your metabolism down, which means you're going to start responding to food, to workouts, to life very, very differently. And you're going to start responding out of survival, which survival mode is going to always lead to the conservation, the storing, and the hoarding of energy, not the use of it. So it's not that energy is not there, but your body's doing something very different with it as a means to protect it. And when you start storing, hoarding, and conserving energy, you change what you do with the food that you consume. You change how you respond to the workouts that you do. Instead of having energy and feeling vibrant and being at a healthy weight, you're going to start storing extra weight. The food is going to no longer be used as energy, but it's going to be stored as energy. The workouts are no longer going to burn energy, but they're going to make you and force you to store more energy. And that can come in the process of increasing hunger, increasing cravings, and really decreasing your detox pathways. It's going to slow the rate of which energy is used inside your body, how it's generated, and how much your cells actually have the job that they were designed to do. It's going to lead to a lot of compensation, which means your body's going to start picking and choosing what its necessary functions are, diverting energy there and away from the less necessary task of the body. Now, arguably, every task inside the body is highly necessary. It all serves a role. But in times of need, your body will shift and turn off different functions based on the energy available. And if your body's energy feels threatened because you're not consuming enough, you're overworking out, your lifestyle is not conducive to supporting your body, it is always going to lead to a downregulation and a compensation. And we really miss this because in the dieting space, a lot of the times it's just the extremes. It's just eat less calories, move more, stop eating these certain macronutrients without any real understanding of, but what is that doing inside your body? And most importantly, how is your body responding to that? It will work in the short term because like any movement on the pendulum, your body thrives in a little bit of stress. It loves change and it will change with change. But change and prolonged periods without a rebalancing on that pendulum is always going to lead to the survival response and the downregulation, the compensation of your body. And in time, this will lead to the opposite effect of probably what you're looking for. And in the end, it will lead you to feeling more out of control, more dysregulated, and really then again, seeking a new form of order. And this can all happen subconsciously. Like you can live your life completely unaware that this is a system you actually have more control over than you realize. And not in the way that you can control how your body actually responds, which would be really nice. And I think a lot of the times we go into a diet believing that if I just do these things perfectly, my body will respond in the exact way that I want it to. If you've ever dieted or been around anyone who's dieted, you know that is very untrue. Your body does not respond in a linear way. There's a lot of steps involved, and really how your body responds is a lot out of your control. Like we can't control that, but we can control how we support our body. And how we support our body is going to help maintain a state of homeostasis. Now, I teach all about this inside Health Made Simple. So if you really want to understand how to learn to work with your body and up-level your metabolism, to get your body to stop compensating and downregulating, and really to live in this thriving state, Health Made Simple is it. And we break down every single different process inside your body so you can really understand this, including the practical steps that you need to take to do this. Now, I'm going to leave a little bit more over at the Living Well and the weekly Fill newsletter where we're going to break this down a bit more. But giving you an actual image of what this pendulum looks like inside your body. I'm going to try to explain it again really briefly because it's really, really important to understand this process. And hopefully in a way to help you understand when you've maxed out your stress response and you've entered into survival, which is one of the leading forms of dysregulation. So if we think about like a grandfather clock and the back and forth motion of that hand in the middle, right? Like the back and forth, that's essentially a pendulum. And that's how our body works. Balance is not a stationary, static place. It's not a one set system. It is always moving. It's in motion. Even your body temperature is moving. In the morning, it's going to be different than it is in the evening. There's not a huge variation, but there is a variation. We like to see movement. We like to see motion. I would even argue that seeing this in your blood sugar is better than just having a blunted or stagnant blood sugar response. We like to see a little bit of movement there. Changing our body is going to take a level of stress. It's going to take work, which means we have to move the body outside of that homeostatic balance, outside of that immediate response. Remember, our body loves work. It thrives in work. And so we have to be able to push our body on some level. We have to engage in hard workouts. We have to change our diet from time to time. We can engage in hard lifestyle activities. We can do hard projects. We can get our mind to do wild things. But within that, to maintain that homeostatic balance, we need to rebalance that or regulate that by also nourishing, sleeping well, stretching, drinking plenty of water. Those are all things that allow our body to do the harder things. And when we can get this balance of stress and rest just slightly outside our homeostatic balance, we are going to see our body change. Our body needs change in order to change. And anytime we refuse to change, our body will always, I don't want to say get complacent, but it will just kind of stall there. It will create maintenance, which is not bad. We will always have maintenance from time to time. But generally speaking, throughout life and throughout the changes of life, we're going to need to push our body. It's going to engage in different things. And naturally, life is always going to push us out of balance on some level. We should not fear this, but actually, really, it can be really beneficial. Like, this is where resilience is built. We have to do hard things, engage in hard things, go through hard things, whether chosen or not, and that is going to help our body to become resilient and strong and successful. Problems exist when we push our body to one extreme for too long, whether in work or rest. When we take the diet to the next level and we eliminate specific macronutrients, we cut calories, we work out too hard. I don't know what it is for you or what it's been, but when you do that for prolonged and consistent periods of time, your body is eventually going to stall. It's going to go from just stress and change and healthy response to surviving. And it is going to force your body to fall back to the opposite degree, the same way that you pushed it to work. The same could be true for rest though too. Like we can over-rest and create a survival response from that as well. But I'm just trying to show you that it's not bad to push your body. It's not bad to set routines and disciplines that are actually making your body engage in work. Those are very necessary, but they have to come within a rebalancing effect. That you also have to pull your body back and re-nourish and feed it well so that you can maintain that state of homeostatic balance, so that your body doesn't refuse to work with you and start to work against you. It's really to create a positive response inside your body. Now, again, most diets work in the extremes, and they work there because you can see results pretty quickly. The problem is, and why 97% of all diets fail, is because it's too extreme to be maintained for a long period of time, and it's also forcing the body outside of its homeostatic norm for too long that it starts to work against you. As soon as your body works against you, you will start to compensate and downregulate. And it's not that your body is against you. It's for you. It's working for your survival. It's maintaining life in the best way that it knows how. And we have to understand and respect that in order to really get on board with learning how to work with our body. Now, all of that being said, again, I think we have come to the place where we don't like our body. We don't trust our body. And we have a lot of bad body beliefs. Again, not all of them are your beliefs. Some of them were generational beliefs that were forced into you, and we're going to talk about that generational cycle and how powerful it is in part 2. But I just want to end this podcast by reminding you it's not wrong to want order or a sense of control. I think it's how we go about that that's changing what we get from that. And we can do it from a place of dieting, or we can do it from a place of understanding our body and just the natural foundation of health and create boundaries and disciplines from within that. It's taking what we know about dieting and making it work in a way that works with your body, not against your body. It's not recognizing your body as a problem and searching for all these external solutions, but it's coming from a place of, I think my body has what it takes to heal. I want to support that. But I know I'm going to have to live disciplined in order to do that, because the natural pull of life is never towards health. It is always towards unhealth. It is always pulling us in a form of dysregulation. However, that's also kind of an outlook. Like if we really look a little bit deeper, there's so many natural properties of life that are really working to rebalance us. But we have to engage with those. And our lifestyle is not very conducive to engaging with the natural, God-given gifts of regulation that are all around us. And that comes from like daily sunlight, getting fresh air, getting outside, connections, being with other people, accepting the hug, working together, eating as a family. Like there's so many natural practices that we have really learned to disengage with. I think the more we've tried to find control in the places that we're never going to find it. Instead of creating control in the places that we can, which really means learning how to co-regulate with all of life to stress our body, but also nourish it on the backside to create a sense of balance. So yes, there is tons of crazy, wild, terrible diet advice. And it's not really going anywhere because for all of eternity, we're always going to have to be working on our health. Our health is always going to be changing and evolving. And I think we've let that scare us because health has really been boiled down to a destination we think we're going to arrive at where forever we'll always be healthy. That place doesn't exist. And I don't say that to scare you, but to give you a lot of freedom. To say that you can set healthy boundaries, but there's a lot of flexibility within those of ability to change with the changing of seasons and the changing of your life. Like how you move your body today might be different than how you move your body in 20 years. Or what you eat right now might be different than what you eat in the spring. There's constant changes, ebbs and flows all throughout life. And if we attach ourselves to a sense of control like the diet space is making us believe exist, we're going to miss out on the true freedom and flexibility and really the process of just learning how to nurture your body regardless of what season you're in. Health is complicated because we've tried to control what is not in our control while neglecting what is. We're trying to create order through things that are really creating more dysregulation. And that only creates more chaos. It creates more extremes. It makes people feel like everything is wrong with them. And I don't blame you. But I'm trying to help show you that this does not have to be your story. We can use some of the things from the diet industry to recognize what is going to support our body, to stress our body a little bit, but also nourish it on the backside without being so consumed with them, pulling us into a state of total dysregulation. But again, that comes back to having better beliefs. It comes back to trusting your body, which is not always easy. And as I mentioned in part 2 of this podcast, we're going to talk about beliefs. Beliefs about your body, beliefs about food, beliefs about what it takes to get healthy. We're really going to break all of that down in part 2 because that's a really big part of healing from bad diet advice. It's opening you up to create that sense of safety, which re-engages your intuition, your creativity, your sense of connection, which is really required to live healthy. So I hope this podcast gave you a new perspective on diets, not to just trash them all together or throw them under the bus. I think really at the end of the day, we're all working for the same thing. We're just maybe going about it in different ways. I want to help you understand your need for your body, your need for wholeness, and then learn what it takes to get there. And I've realized over the last few months, this is really my passion. This is kind of a side note, but I feel like it goes along with this and really just gave me a sense of empowerment when I decided to say no to certain things that felt enticing, that I knew would be enticing, right? Like I'm presented all of these different products and all of these different ideas, and a lot of them are like new ways to like quick fixes for weight loss and a new supplement that's going to help. And they're really shiny and they're really enticing, even for me, someone who's been in this space. And they're coming from health practitioners, right? Like people who really know their stuff. But when I really settle into it and I think, okay, that might be someone else's model, but my model and my role and my purpose is not here for the quick fix and the quick income rise that that product might give me. That might be for someone else, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. There is a time and a place when people do need help. When we go back to the article I wrote on Ozempic, It's a really complicated subject because we can't just say it's bad for everyone. Some people do need that jumpstart. They need that extra help. And there are products on the market that could help. My job is not that job. My job is to inspire you, to encourage you, and to teach you what it means to create health within you, which means you have to come to trust your body by knowing your body and knowing the greater good of your body, which is the connection to your mind, body, and soul. All of that to say, I hope you're encouraged from this podcast. I would love to know your thoughts. Make sure you follow me at The Living Well and especially the newsletter, The Weekly Fill, where we create more of a community there to discuss these topics and where I fill you in on more personal information that's going on in my own life. So head on over to The Living Well to check that out. You can sign up for my newsletter there. And then, as always, I would love if you shared this with your friends and family. It literally means the world to me. It is the only way a podcast like this grows. So share it on social media, send it in an email, tell others about it, and get them inspired to join this community who's just here to do health differently. I thank you in advance for all of that. And I remind you, don't forget to come back next week as we dive into part 2.